Okay. So, welcome. I'm Joan Ditzion. I'm one of the original found. Oh, by the way, we're just going to sit at the table. We find it's more conversational. I'm Joan Ditzion. I'm one of the original founders of the Boston Women's Health Book Collective, and I, along with Nancy, Miriam, Hawley, and Paula, Doress-Worters, and Wendy, Sanford, welcome you to this panel, Formative Years, the Birth of Our Bodies Ourselves. Basically, we're thrilled to be part of this conference and really thank Deborah Bell and Yahoo King and all the planners who really trying to capture the original passionate sort of social justice vision that we had, the creativity, the intelligence, the energy that was unleashed in us as a cohort of second wave feminists during these sort of revolutionary moments of the beginnings of the women's movement in the late 60s and early 70s. For us as founders of Our Bodies Ourselves, we've sort of been part of that movement. And we never would have imagined, as we worked on a project to help ourselves and other women learn about reproduction, sexuality, and healthcare, that this project will have come so far and really touch the lives, really change the global conversation on, women and health. We are one of the few surviving organizations from the early days of the women's movement. And we recently celebrated our 40th anniversary, and along with global women who've adapted our book, and we also have a 40th anniversary edition of Our Bodies Ourselves. Basically, none of us would have imagined. The book seemed to really strike a responsive chord with women, change so many hands, touch the lives of so many women here and around the world, and 4.5 million copies have been sold. It's been really delightful talking to people in the last few days. Many of you have familiar with Our Bodies Ourselves. How many of you actually have read the book? Oh, good. Oh, cool.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Oh, terrific. Yeah, all right. No, okay. And you probably have a story for yourself or your sister or a friend or mother or roommate or colleague who turned to this book for trustworthy, supportive information at a sort of critical time in your or their lives. Basically, I guess that's all really part of our story. We want to hear from you, and that's part of the theme of today, because it's a story that keeps expanding and keeps growing. So what we tell you a little bit about the format of our panel today, basically, as birth mothers of Our Bodies Ourselves, we'll weave personal stories with the history of the project, then open up for discussion. We'll have small group and then large group conversations, and then come back. We do want to say, as founders, we're aging women now. And the founder group, which now is 12 women, range from 66 to 82. And we want to make sure that the wisdom we've accumulated, the legacy of these moments that have been captured in this conference today, are really preserved, are built on, and we want to stimulate intergenerational conversation so that together we can really begin to think of the important issues as we move forward to maintain and continue the struggle for social justice. I want to also say that some of you might be interested in more details of the history of the project, and so we have a timeline. Some of you picked it up, but if not, a timeline here to just give you the whole sort of trajectory over more than 42 years. And also, we have our website, ourbodiesourselves.org, and there's a visual display of some photos and memorabilia that's in the basement in this building, in the Gender, Sexuality, and Activism Center there. So do check it out. Yeah.
I couldn't find it. Could you tell us more specifically where it is?
What?
I couldn't find it in the basement. Could you give us more specific?
It's in a room, there's a women's resource center that's
Yeah.
run by BU students, and it's, while you access it from the cafeteria area, you have to go down some stairs.
We'll
And,
help you with
you'll-
Yeah,
well,
yeah, but just go down.
Ah,
Right,
oh,
yeah.
that's helpful, thank you.
Take the elevator downstairs, and then it's right across, and down a little corridor, yeah.
And take
Yeah.
Freddie with you.
Take what?
The woman who asked the question, yeah,
Okay,
okay.
great. And also, you know, our materials are archived in this Schlesinger, so you have access to that as well. And basically, so let's begin. And here we are. This is Nancy Miriam Hawley, Paula Doress-Worters, Wendy Sanford, Jane Pincus, who is not able to be with us for a last minute, really sends her love. In the audience, we have Pam Berger and our amazing executive director, Judy Norsegian, who will be on her way. She'll be here soon. And let's see, Vilunia Diskin, Norma Swenson, Sally Whalen, Ruth Alexander Bell, and Elizabeth McMahon, with great regret, can't be here. And Esther Rome and Pamela Morgan, who died, spirits are with us. So without further ado, let's just begin.
Hi, welcome everybody. And as I begin, I want you to ask yourself, what is my burning question? And I will.
Yeah, okay.
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 Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. If you don't hear me, just I'll keep my eyes open and look.
Oh, good.
This work, okay. So as you listen, I invite you to think, what is my burning question? And a burning question helps you get at the purpose of your life and the actions you need to take to fulfill your purpose. A burning question keeps you up at night, wakes you up in the morning, and is with you. So I'm going to talk about my burning question. And the story begins, today I'm 71 years old. I mean, it's not my birthday, but it's my 71st year. And my story begins about 48 years ago. And some of you weren't even born yet. And so I was at the office of my OBGYN for the 6-week checkup for my oldest son. And so you imagine me as a 23-year-old young professional woman asking a question after the doctor recommended I take this pill. He hands me a pill. He said, take this. And I said, wait a second. It was a new-to-market birth control pill. And I said, what's in this pill? And he said, dear, don't worry your pretty little head. Just take it. Well, I was enraged. I left the office. I didn't take the pill. And at first I was embarrassed, to be asking the question, and then the anger, built up. And as I said, I refused to take the pill. Within the next month, I moved to Boston, and the question still was with me. So this is in the context of the 60s. And if you look at the larger context of America, we have a growing civil rights, anti-war movements, and followed by some of the deaths of our most important leaders, Martin Luther King Jr., John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Robert Kennedy. We're coming out of the 50s and the feminine mystique, and the beginnings of the second wave of the women's movement that I was engaged in when I moved to Boston. So I was the first generation of my family to complete college. My parents were activists. Social justice was our family's religion. I grew up singing songs of Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, Odetta, the Weavers. My mother was an early feminist and encouraged me to get the professional degree she hadn't been able to get because of the Great Depression. So I'm involved in helping, these little pods around the country and around Boston were popping up, and we were beginning as women to talk to one another about the issues that were important to us. And I had been active in college in SDS, Students for Democratic Society, And in the summer of '68, I got a call from Marilyn Salzman Webb inviting me to a meeting of women in SDS who wanted to talk about our role as women in SDS. I was just leaving for a family vacation. I said, no, I can't go, but keep me in touch with what follows up. She calls me back after the summer and says, we're meeting in November of '68 in Chicago. Please come. Again, it was a gathering of politically active women who were coming together. And that was the event where Naomi Weinstein, who was referred to yesterday, gave her her ovarian paper on education, and Ann Coit read The Myth of the Vaginal Orgasm. It blew our minds. I came back to Boston, and at that point, there were little meetings all around, and I, as a faculty wife, my husband at that point was teaching at MIT, I had access to space. And so we had many meetings in MIT, and I laughed when I say that Our Bodies Ourselves began at MIT. But some of us were faculty wives of MIT professors. And we came back, and these meetings were, people came by word of mouth. And so I was really eager to share what had happened in Chicago with people, and did. And the meetings continued. And out of the meetings, there was a move to create a conference, a chance for women to really talk more with one another. And now we're at April, we're in 1969. So this is late '68, early '69, and some of us come together. And for me, get this picture. It's late April '69, and I'm sitting in my living room in Cambridge. I'm exhausted. I'm sitting in a butterfly chair. It's early in the morning, and my daughter has finally fallen asleep in my arms, having been up most of the night. And I said, why did I get involved in helping to organize this first women's conference? I'm crazy. You know, and then I look at my daughter and I think about all the women's stories and the burning questions that have been shared in these meetings, you know, of women's difficult birth experiences, difficult pregnancy experiences, inability to get an abortion when they wanted to. And I thought, I'm doing this. And then I looked at my daughter asleep in my arm and I said, honey, I'm doing this for you. And let's see. So it's May 4th, 1969. I'm standing in front of a packed room at Emmanuel College's first female liberation conference. And I'm leading the workshop, Control of Their Bodies. And the language is very important in terms of the closeness or distance we felt from our bodies. And then from June of '69 to December '70, there was a lot of activity. The room was packed at the conference, and women wanted to continue the conversation. And so there was a lot of activity that happened that summer. We meet in each other's homes, we research topics on women's health and sexuality, we gather together women's experiences, we mimeograph papers, we deliver a course at MIT, at an MIT lounge. Again, we're back at MIT. And women ask for a book. We raise money and print the book ourselves. In December 1970, Women and Their Bodies, later named Our Bodies Ourselves, is born. So in the next 2 years, we sell about 250,000 copies of Our Bodies Ourselves, Women and Their Bodies.
Women and their bodies.
By word of mouth. And every woman has a body, knowledge is power, and we sell the book to Simon & Schuster to achieve wider distribution. Our Bodies Ourselves, one of the things that is important from the beginning is the 3 threads of Our Bodies Ourselves. We wanted, okay, there's 3 threads. One was getting accurate medical and health information. The next was getting women's experiences. we are the best experts on ourselves. And we talked to one another, and as women shared experiences, we took them down and included them. And the third was a political analysis of a social, economic, political analysis of the health system. It wasn't a health system, it's a medical care system. And for some of us, this was new, and for some of us, this was what I grew up with and was involved with throughout my young adult years. So, and those three threads have permeated, and I think made the integration of those three threads have made Our Bodies Ourselves still stand up 40 plus years from now. So Our Bodies Ourselves helped change the culture. For the first time, women took responsibility for their health before the internet, social media, and ubiquitous connectivity. And one of the things I want to acknowledge that just happened this week, we were acknowledged as a group as one of 24, the title was 24 Extraordinary Women Who Changed Sex Forever. In the some of you may have seen that reference in the Huffington Post. So it began for me and for this group with my burning question. What's in the pill that a doctor refused to answer? It was the right question at the time, at a time when the culture was ready to hear it. About 40 years later, the book's still in print, and the question that gave rise to it is now answered, though in doing so, deeply ingrained attitudes about doctors, knowledge, the role of gender, and women's rights were transformed. And there's a new burning question. I'm going to just end right now with my new burning question that has arisen for me because I've asked you to think about your burning questions. It's ever been as compelling as the original for me, less concrete maybe, less medical, less gender specific, but no less important, just as urgent and maybe even more so. How do we bring our whole selves to the whole of our lives in the moment? And with that, I'll end.
Good morning. I'm Paula, and I'm 75 years old. We're all telling our age this morning. And I'm sorry, I have to read to avoid going off on tangents. I grew up the eldest child of immigrants from Eastern Europe in the 1940s and 1950s in Roxbury, which was then a predominantly Jewish working class neighborhood of Boston. Unlike Miriam's parents, mine were not politically active, but as relatively new citizens made sure to vote in every election, and that became an important value in our family. I grew up increasingly aware of my mother's anxiety about family remaining in Poland, the grandmother and uncles I would never know. This awareness sensitized me to racism as a danger in all societies. When African Americans moving north after World War II settled in Roxbury, I noticed that the city bus drivers that we rode to the high school were rude to them when they got on the bus, if they didn't know the fare or whatever, reason might have been. And other adults and some teens as well were uncomfortable with our new neighbors. As I came of age in the 1960s in America, race really became a focus for college students all over the United States. Many of us in the Our Bodies Ourselves Founders group were active in the social justice movements of the 1960s, especially civil rights and opposition to the Vietnam War. After graduating from college, I worked as a community organizer in a racially mixed section of Roxbury. When some in our organizing project embraced Black nationalism, they urged white participants to go back to their communities to organize white people against racism. As a newly married woman living in a brick apartment building in another part of the city without porches or yards for neighboring, I wondered where and what was my community, if not for this project. The rise of a women's liberation movement at the time was an exciting new development. that provided an answer for many of us, and for me as well. How could we be successful in the fight for greater social equality without challenging our own subordinate positions as women in marriage, in the workplace, and the wider society? I began attending CR groups and task force groups with the hope that our new movement would strengthen women in our personal lives and empower us as a political movement. At the first Women's Liberation Conference in Boston in May of 1969, there were such a variety of workshops offered. I watched a karate demonstration and signed up for a class in Brookline. I attended a session on women in Algeria, and there were many countries, people who had traveled there or knew something about it, presenting. I was drawn to a session on women and control of our bodies, in large part because the two discussion leaders were friends of mine, and I was curious what they would be talking about. Miriam Nancy Hawley, then a new friend I met through the women's movement, now an old friend of nearly a half century. She was presenting on the advantages of prepared childbirth, which both of us had experienced. The other presenter was sociologist Nancy Stoller Shaw, an old friend from the civil rights movement, who was presenting on abortion as an important part of reproductive rights, but then still illegal in the United States. That workshop was especially well attended, and yet despite our numbers, everyone had a chance to share their questions and experiences. It was so compelling that many of us wanted to continue meeting through the summer with the goal of creating a course that would help other women find answers to health and medical concerns. That summer of research and sharing experiences was the beginning of the Our Bodies Ourselves project. Those developments coincided with important changes in my life. I had become a mother in 1966 and seemingly out of nowhere was overcome with depression and marital problems. I was frustrated and dismayed that there was no literature for lay readers on postpartum depression, so I chose that topic for my research and course presentation. When the opportunity arose to publish a book based on our course, I felt motivated to do further research on postpartum. I worked with the late Esther Rome, not yet a mother then, her mother had experienced a postpartum depression, and she knew about that through her childhood. So we were a good team and crafted a chapter that looked at the physical and emotional challenges of postpartum depression and ended with a list we called our demands, that is, social policy changes that would ease the isolation of new mothers and support mothers and children, such as free childcare. We were naive about what was involved, but we were able to identify what was needed. We were a group that challenged the role of experts, especially those who set themselves up as experts on women. In the medical literature, we read that women were passive, narcissistic, and masochistic. Who were those women? We didn't know. Our motto was, women are the best experts on ourselves, and that was an important theme of Our Bodies Ourselves. That can-do philosophy shaped our approach to the research we did for the course and later for the book. We each chose chapters that particularly interested us and wrote from a laywoman's perspective, turning to our few allies in the medical profession to help us gain access to medical journals, steer us to useful resources, and read chapters when they were completed to be sure of medical accuracy. We also shared information on doctors for women seeking referrals to doctors who were good in their specialties and also were not condescending to women. There were very few women doctors at the time, maybe 6% overall, and only 2% of OBGYNs because that was considered a surgical specialty. We were also empowered by our can-do philosophy in our group decision-making. In negotiating a contract with our publisher, we asked for concessions that were unheard of. We insisted on control over the cover, worried about, the sexy woman image, And we insisted on traveling in pairs on book tours. Traveling together strengthened our bonds within the group and also served to demonstrate collaboration as we shared the spotlight on interviews. We also asked for and received a clinic discount for low-income women and funding for a U.S. Spanish translation. And here's one of our early ones. So I just wanted to say a little about some other book projects I worked on. Following Our Bodies, Ourselves, and Ourselves Growing Older. Okay. So that you held that up before. In one of our succeeding chapters after the early ones, we added a chapter on women growing older. And then realizing we were trying to cram the years from 40 up into one chapter, we came up with the idea of a book called Ourselves Growing Older and a subsequent edition, the new Ourselves Growing Older. This was in the 1980s and 1990s. I was in my 40s at the beginning of it. I worked with Diana Laskin-Siegel, who was then in her 50s, and became my role model for how to manage hot flashes. We reached out to other midlife women and to those older than ourselves, holding something like CR groups, where we started with the question, what kinds of older women do I want to be? Knowing that the longevity of women was increasing as we grew older, and wanting to have some vision of what life would be like in those later years that we are given as a kind of a gift, and just wanting to make the most of those years. And those books are still available in libraries, and it would be lovely if some women wanted to pick up on that project, because there haven't been later editions. In between book projects, I taught women's studies as an adjunct professor at Emerson College. And in the course of preparing a women's history curriculum, I came across a name that was new to me. Ernestine Rose was an early 19th century activist and a mentor to the better-known Stanton and Anthony. As an immigrant, a Jew, and an atheist, Rose transcended those marginal identities to become a groundbreaking early leader of first-wave feminism. She coined the phrase, "women's rights are human rights," which yesterday I heard attributed to Hillary Clinton. And I'm glad to know that people are carrying on that idea. So in my 60s at Brandeis University's Women's Studies Research Center, I satisfied my curiosity about this elusive early women's rights leaders, and my curiosity about that movement and how women got themselves together and did so much at a time when women had so few legal or economic rights. Women couldn't leave home without their husband's permission. They couldn't get custody of their children after a divorce, and so women stayed in bad marriages. There were many things that are hard to even imagine a situation like that. And so what I did was I collected Rose's speeches and letters, and I wrote an introductory chapter about her life and work in women's rights, abolition of slavery, and religious free thought. That was my time. Okay, so I'll just say, okay, so I just want to mention that my burning issue of the moment is about gun control, which has become a politically incorrect phrase, that we now say community gun safety. And I can talk to people more, and there's a women's issue attached to it, but I can talk to that to people one-on-one, anyone who's interested. So, thank you.
My name's Wendy, and I came from a very different family than the ones you've been hearing about. I came from a white, upper middle class, WASP suburban family in Princeton, New Jersey, and I had gone to college at Radcliffe and had graduated fairly recently, and had just had a baby, and with my husband, and I was a very unlikely person in some ways, to become part of this group. And I credit Esther Rome, our beloved Esther. Her husband and my husband worked together in architecture school. And so we got to know each other a little bit. And she told me there was this course happening in the lounge at MIT, and that I really had to go. And I don't know how you are when you're depressed, but the last thing I do when I'm depressed is go do something that would be good for me. And so I didn't go. She said, you've got to come. It's Tuesday night, blah, 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 and I didn't go. So the next Tuesday, she sent someone to pick me up. So I got myself into this person's car, and we arrived at this MIT lounge, and I walked in the room, and there are like 50 women. Some of them are nursing their babies. They are mostly my age or a little tiny bit older. And the woman up at the front of the room is talking about masturbation. Oh my heavens. It was so embarrassing. And so I remember I just kind of dropped to the floor and didn't say a word the whole time. But listened really hard because of masturbation.
We were sitting on the floor.
Yes, we're all sitting on the floor, right. Right. Yeah, with the women were clustered around, leaning on each other, and just really, it was a very cozy scene. So then we did something called, and I had been suffering from a postpartum depression, as Paula had also. Lying on the living room floor while my son slept, just thinking, how am I going to get up? How am I going to do this? And shouldn't I be happy? I should. And my husband thought I should be happy too, so that didn't help too much either. So then we broke into small groups, which I had never done before in my life, was break into small groups. I mean, it was even a new pedagogy that came out of the anti-war movement and some of the other social change movements that these folks, I didn't even know who Pete Seeger was at the time.
Oh my
so
God.
I was just really not a candidate for this group. And so we broke into small groups, and I walked into one of the little MIT classrooms, and there's Miriam organizing chairs, and there's Paula, none of whom I knew at the time. And so we started talking about sex, and I heard the word clitoris for the first time, and I said out loud. And I heard people say, you know, these are our bodies, and we should be able to enjoy sex. And I just hadn't heard any of this before. But then someone started talking about postpartum depression. And Paula spoke, and Esther spoke, and it's like you hear about that early second wave women's movement, consciousness raising kind of moment where you're gripped, and it speaks to you. And it spoke to me. And I understood that lying around on my living room floor feeling how was I going to get up and like a failure at motherhood was partly hormonal, it was partly social, it was partly the isolation that we all lived in, it was partly the expectation. There were so many reasons for it, and that we could do something about informing other women so they wouldn't suffer the way as much as we had. So I left that night feeling I've been part of this movement ever since. It was like, that's what did it. It wasn't clitoris that did it for me, although I'm very grateful to that part. But it was the postpartum depression. And the other story I wanted to tell before talking about a couple of the aspects of the book as it developed is that I had a gynecologist at the time who, you know, they had been trained that, he was a man, that part of their role was to advise us on our lives. And when I was depressed and asked him about it, he said, well, I like to tell my young mothers, go to the library once in a while, and you know, we were upper middle class, so it wasn't a question of my trying to get back to work, which many women at that time and today face. But I was, he said, I'd like to tell my young mothers to go to the library and improve their minds so that they can help raise the next generation. And he said, but don't get work, don't go to work, because your husband comes home tired at night. And he went on, I need to, gag me with a spoon. So anyway, he went on with that. So then I decided I wanted to use a diaphragm because I didn't want to take pills. So you can see I was kind of a natural for the group in that way. And so he showed me how to use a diaphragm and measured me for it, and I asked him, when should I put it in? And he said, I like to tell my ladies, dinner, dishes, diaphragm. So I ended up in the women's health movement. It's so great. There's so many things I want to say. But I became active in helping to edit the books. For instance, I got to be an editor for Esther and Paula on this chapter that meant so much to me. So it was, that was great. So I'm going to talk about just one aspect, which is, we acknowledged from the start of this project in our very first book that we were a group of white middle-class women. My father worked for, anyway, I said, well, we're 10 middle-class women and 1 aristocrat is what I wanted to say. But we said we're, middle-class women and white, and that we're able-bodied, and there were many things we didn't know about. But someone yesterday was talking about, in the early women's liberation movement, this kind of great power of the we, feeling like we could say we and mean all women. There was that heady feeling, and it took us years to understand how much was missing in our we. We had a lot to say, and we, created a lot of useful stuff, but there were so many women with other experiences than ours whose voices needed to be in the women's health movement, and in fact already were, and we just didn't know it. So there was a whole process of learning for us, and I want to talk, and the book got bigger and bigger and bigger as we learned about other groups and invited them to become part of it. But I wanted to talk first about lesbians, because of course everyone at the time thought we were all lesbians, and none of us were. So we asked a group from the Boston area, some of whom are here at this conference, which is really wonderful. I'm not sure any are in this room, to write a chapter. And they insisted on editorial control, of course. And so they call the chapter In America with a K, they call us Dykes, which was our first challenge in respecting what another group wanted. Just like we were insisting with our publisher that we get certain things, they insisted with us. And that chapter, there are more people who say to me, that chapter changed my life. Yes. If you know Tess Ewing, she's here. She was one of the people in that chapter. And Marla Erline, who's another person in the Cambridge area. So they wrote the chapter, and I just remember that our meetings with them were fraught for me. Because they scared me to death. And it turned out I am the only lesbian in the Boston Women's Health Book Collective at this point, but I didn't know it at the time. But anyway, so we really did want to have a lesbian chapter in the book for so many reasons, including that a lot of straight women would get the book and they'd learn what they needed to know to understand themselves and their friends and their daughters and their mothers and et cetera. Okay, I have like 2 or 3 more minutes. Women with disabilities, each edition grew because of the involvement of some new group. And one of these editions, I became Judy, who's in our group, who's back there, our executive director. Her husband, Irv Zola, was very active in Boston Self-Help. And so he introduced us to some of the women from Boston Self-Help. And those women met with us and transformed certain aspects of the book. Like, we created a body image chapter because we wanted to talk about how women are looked at, whose eyes we're looking at ourselves with, and what some of the limited expectations were for women who didn't look the way we were supposed to look. They really transformed body image and sexuality, and now in the current book, there are, in the childbirth chapter, there, we kind of mainstreamed a lot of that information. Paula talked about older women. Menopausal women were old to us at the time, and so it was a big deal to include a chapter on menopause. The women of color were doing a lot of their own organizing, and Jane, who couldn't be here, her close friend from college, who was African-American woman, said, you guys have written a book for white women. And Jane was incensed, and we were all incensed. And then gradually we understood that there's a lot we had to offer, but there were experiences that we didn't know. And for instance, just one example was to hammer away at abortion rights, which are incredibly important, but not talk about sterilization abuse was so we were only seeing part of the story. Or not to talk about a woman's right to have children and to have the support from the community to have children, which Paula was also talking about. So we realized there were a lot of interwoven topics, and the National Black Women's Health Project got going. A group of Latinas eventually wrote their own version of our book. We did some fundraising for that, and they changed the book around. They put spiritual questions in that we never touched as a fairly atheist group at the time. We've all mellowed in some of those areas. Then the last group that I wanted to mention that we felt very important for us to include was genderqueer and trans women. And the last two versions of the book, we have had a lot more about those issues in there, and so much so that in this day and age, even if you say woman, you can't assume we all have the same body, because there are people who experience being women who don't have that body. So even that is really changing, and it will probably continue to change. So that's it for now.
As you can tell from these stories, as birth mothers, after 42 years, we're bonded for life. My initial awakening to feminism, I'm Joan Ditzion, by the way, I said that earlier. My initial awakening to feminism began in 1969 January at an anti-inaugural Nixon gathering in Washington, D.C. And I was a young woman then, 25 years old, and newly married, I guess, almost 2 years. And there was a group of women from Boston at this conference, from Bread and Roses. And they said, we don't want to make coffee, we don't want to take notes, we want full participation in this process, and we want to change gender inequities. So I thought, that sounds interesting. When we moved back to Cambridge, I'd like to find out more about this movement. So in the summer of 1969, we moved back to Cambridge, and I saw in the Old Mole an article. This was a left-wing underground newspaper that said, well, before that, I want to say this, that I come from a socially conscious family, as Miriam did, that my parents were progressives. They were New York City public school teachers. I come from a sort of a close Jewish extended family, and I was the firstborn child and basically felt the influence of a strong matriarchy in my family, of women who were wonderful and always present in my life, and really inspired me to become part of the women's movement. And in those days, basically, the political climate was such. Well, anyhow, I was in part of, before that, I guess I had been part of the civil rights movement, and but I came of age actually in Berkeley. I was a graduate student in Berkeley and became part of the the free speech movement. And that was probably an awakening for me. And so it was a time, as has been evoked by people here, there was a political optimism that we really thought we could make a difference and change some of the oppressive institutions in society. and really make the world a better place. It was a very sort of idealistic time in our lives. And so, when we moved back to Cambridge, I found this ad in the Old Mole, and it was a course for women and their bodies. We were still in third person, not our bodies ourselves at that point, and basically felt, oh, wow, okay, I want to sign up. So I, like Wendy, joined the project at that point and went to the meeting at MIT, the first course that was being given. And I guess we, as women at that point, were just beginning to awaken to the fact that we had really been socialized female in a rather patriarchal society, and just beginning to sort of get an awareness of what that meant. So the first sessions were, as was described, on sexuality. And basically, in fact, that first session, there was this big drawing of a vagina. It was the more explicit picture I've ever seen really in public before. And then there was discussion of masturbation and, clitoral orgasm. And I, like Wendy, was a bit, taken by it all. I mean, I knew at that point, basically, that I didn't know much about women's reproduction, about sexuality, about health. I had the biological facts of life, but I didn't know a lot of more than that. And so it was wonderful to break through and really begin to own and claim a woman-centered view of female sexuality. Sitting around the circle, there were these diverse stories about pregnancy and childbirth, and it was just the beginnings of the sort of the natural childbirth movement and breastfeeding, and it was all sort of new. My mother's story to me growing up about her childbirth experience was, well, I was in the hospital, I was anesthetized, and then the doctor brought you to me. So that was sort of, I knew it was more than that, but that had been the prior era of women's experience of childbirth. I was on the pill at the time, and then really though, through these conversations became aware how reproductive rights was like a core right for every single woman. We needed safe birth control. We needed abortion as a last resort. And it was chilling to sit around and hear women's stories about having to resort to coat hangers and go to New York for back alley abortions. And so there was amazing energy in the room, and I knew that I just wasn't getting information like I needed to from the mainstream, and that all women's experiences really needed to be validated. So those were, for me, the ha-ha moments of those early days, because I really began to embrace a sort of a woman-centered view of my life. That I had been socialized female, obviously, that basically I was the other sex, though. I was inferior to men. I was less than. We were the secondary sex. And I thought a male point of view was the real view of reality. And so when I began to realize, no, born female, that's how it, and that I really claimed a woman-centered view of myself and my life, that was really probably one of the most formative, transforming moments of my life. And so basically, I guess I felt, then the personal is political really had deep meaning for me, because it was sexism in our society and patriarchal views of women and sexist views of women that were preventing us from really being full human beings. And so I really felt, wow, we have to abolish sexism, we have to embrace feminism, and we have to really work for full social, political, and economic equality for all women. And so in 1970, I joined the project. And I just sort of jumped in. It was so gratifying to work on a project that I felt really passionate about. And it was, compelling, this information, to sit in small groups and talk to women about our experiences, to really understand the impact of sexism on our lives. And so it was really compelling, and it was fun to go around and do the course in different community settings, to work on the free press edition, then it took us, when we decided to go with Simon & Schuster commercial press, it took us a year to make that decision whether we could go with a corporate entity and then to pick out Simon & Schuster. We felt yes, because it will really spread the word, and we felt really this is important information that all women need to know. And then we working on the Simon & Schuster edition. And in 1972, when we were signing the contract with Simon & Schuster, we incorporated. We became a group of 12 women. It had been a very open, fluid kind of group up until that point. And during that transition, I think our collaborative writing process sort of deepened, and as we were working on the Simon & Schuster edition. And I had been an art major, and I had written papers in college and graduate school, but this experience was totally different. I had never really, I was writing from a passionate, authentic point of view, personal voice, and I had never taken my words and other women's words so seriously, and never in my life felt that what we were talking about really might make a difference. And I really began to believe in that in a very, very deep way. And so I was always interested in feminine identity issues, and the Free Press and Simon & Schuster worked on myths of women and women's changing sense of self. Then in 1973, I was 30, and my husband and I decided that we wanted to start a family. Now, many of the women in the group were mothers. They loved being mothers. They loved having children, but they became radicalized, really, in many ways, and politicized when they had their children. But they became mothers at the time. This is pre-Women's Lib, when biology was our destiny, and being a mother was intrinsic to being a woman. I decided to have a child. I didn't have children when I joined the women's movement, and so for me, it was really a question, it was a lifestyle decision. I didn't feel my identity was tied up in it, but I really did, we did choose to be a parent. And so basically, it was interesting. I mean, it was wonderful. I felt really in contact with a long ancestry of women, and I really had great pleasure raising kids, and working part-time, was doing book work actually at the time. But I want to say our bodies ourselves was one of the few, we always felt that reproductive rights was probably the most important issue for every single woman. But if parenting is really chosen, and raising the next generation of children is vitally important work in our society. And our society didn't then and still doesn't really, really support families. We don't have free or reasonably accessible childcare for most people, paid paternity and maternity leave, that when people take time off from work, they're penalized, they can't come back, even though they are trying to raise the next generation in our society, and that there's really still, the institutions don't support work-family balance in any kind of way. And so I still feel passionate about this. I think this is one of the unfinished businesses of the women's movement. Just briefly, in terms of now, and then I want to go back to the history, that the project actually inspired me to go to social work school. And I've actually, in recent years, became a geriatric social worker and worked with aging adults and families, and feel passionate now about combating ageism. And I feel we need to all find ways we can age with passion and purpose and a sense of agency, and ageism is as insidious as sexism ever was. I'm also going to be 71 tomorrow, so and aging is good. I went back to watercolor painting after many years and love being a grandmother. But wanting to go back to the early years of our story, and that is this, that after we did the Simon & Schuster edition, all royalties always went back to the organization, and it's never covered all the expenses the organization has then and currently as well. We paid ourselves very, very modestly for book work, and basically we then funded a lot of projects. We had, aside from this, aside from the Spanish edition, we funded a newsletter called Health Right, a film called Taking Our Bodies Back. We funded the Porcupine Women's Health Clinic in South Dakota, a group of Native American women. The book was beginning to inspire a really grassroots women's health movement. Carol Downer, who's here at this conference, started women's self-exam and women monitoring their own menstrual cycle. In those days, Barbara Seaman was making a strong case against indiscriminate use of the birth control pill, and Mary Howell became the first woman dean of Harvard Medical School, and she changed the quota so that it used to be only 8% of females were accepted to medical school. Now it's well beyond 50%. In 1975, we co-sponsored a women's health conference it was actually at Harvard Medical School with Mary Dean, but it was mostly grassroots women that participated, and there were 2,500 participants at the time. The Black Women's Project started, and lots of groups started at that point. And in those years, there were the first adaptations of Our Bodies, Ourselves, in Italian, Japanese, Danish, and British. So just fast forward, going to the present, the Boston Women's Health Book Collective is now called Our Bodies, Ourselves, is one of the few surviving organizations from the early days of the women's movement. And it's changed from a founder-driven collective to this was in the 1990s, a nonprofit with a board, with a full staff, advisory committee. And founder Judy Narcigian is our amazing executive director. Judy has more energy than anyone I know, and basically the organization would not be intact today without Judy. And she has created an amazing network of healthcare activists and healthcare organizations and partners. We have gone global. There are 26 adaptations of the book, and Sally Whalen, who's not here, has coordinated the administration of that. There's a group of Tibetan nuns who translated the book, and they're exiled in India. We have Turkish editions, Egyptian editions, Armenian editions, Nigerian, Russian editions. There's groups of Israel and Palestinian women who've worked together collaboratively and worked on a book both in Hebrew and Arabic. The most recent one is a Vietnam edition, and there's a group of Iranian women who have, in the United States, who've adapted it into Farsi. So we'll see what happens in Iran. Anyhow, also in addition, in 2011 to our 40th anniversary, there was a campaign called Educate Congress. And basically what we did is we try to give copies of Our Bodies, Ourselves, the 2011 edition, to every person, every representative in Congress. It was inspired by that they have evidence-based information to make some of their decisions. This was stimulated by Senate candidate Richard Murdoch from Indiana, who said that pregnancies resulting from rape were just something that God intended. So we thought they needed a little more scientific information about policy. And basically, also the book became, according to the Library of Congress, one of the 88 books that was, the 88 books that shaped America. And so the beat does go on, and basically we encourage you to check out our website, to check out the blog, and we're going to have a new website launched in April, and the mission of the organization remains the same: to empower women with good information to live full human lives. So. Anyhow, we are now, we've talked enough, so we really want to hear from you. And what we'd like you to do, yes? What? Okay, so actually move forward. What we want you to do is pair off with someone next to you, and if seating, it could be groups of 3, but we just want, pair off or triple off, whatever, and do that. And then there are 2 questions I want you to talk about. We want you to talk about.
There's not much time left now.
Oh my God.
No, we don't have much time.
Oh my God.
Went over.
We lost time? Oh, because we started late.
And everyone went over.
Okay, then
So let's just have a free-for-all.
let's have a free-for-all. Okay,
Wait a second, I'll move the mic up.
okay. And I guess what we'd love to hear anything's on your mind, anything but, certainly any Our Bodies, Ourselves stories, but burning issues that you have for today. Yeah. Go.
First of all, thank you all for being in existence. We got
Okay.
your 35-cent.
Why don't you take that one, and I'll move this one so Wendy and I can share
Uh-huh.
it.
It was called How to Have Intercourse Without Getting Screwed. And because we were involved in an abortion rights referendum, we created another one because we found out from our research that 1 out of every 4 women in Washington
in the fall of 1969, I was one of a small group of women from the Yale School of Public Health who heard about what we thought was the Boston School of Harvard's School of Public Health. Anyway, we went late fall to Boston and visited one of you, opened up your home to us, gave us pre-newsprint mimeographed outlines of your course. And I want to know who this person is, because one of you said you opened up with a crotch view of a woman, and I said, I can do that. And so I did. Who was the woman on your collective who did that opening lecture about the crotch view of the woman and masturbation and the sex part? You don't even remember?
Oh, we do. Yeah.
I don't we visited. We did it ourselves in New Haven. But who did your first lecture?
That was Jane DeLong.
Jane DeLong.
Jane
who's here.
DeLong.
Yeah,
Well,
Jane
thank you, Jane DeLong.
And
Ginger Golden. Yeah.
She didn't stay with the group when we started
Oh,
to create the
okay.
course, when we started to work on the book.
Yeah.
But she's a political scientist. She's at the conference.
I'm going to finish
at
my
the
anecdote.
Okay, well, let me just say,
Okay.
her current name is Jane Mansbridge.
Right.
So if you want to.
No,
she's
I don't
here.
want, I just,
Yeah.
we went on to do the course again. It was easy for me to talk about sex, not easy for me to talk about lesbian feelings. We imported a radical lesbian for our second iteration from the course for New York City, and I came out. And then my third experience with lesbianism, the one that in America they call us dykes, I wrote your collective a letter saying, I'm an open lesbian. This is very off-putting to women who want to come out. It was a typical Boston politically correct harangue about lesbianisms, which I did not think would wear well in the Midwest. And I got a polite note back from somebody in the collective saying, well, we contracted that out. None of us are lesbians. That has obviously changed. And you're so well integrated with lesbians. I wrote an anecdote about having a fabulous lust affair at the age of 60 that I didn't even know I was capable of, and I sent it to the collective because they used to publish anecdotes. But you have integrated sexuality so well, the anecdote was too long and you never published it. Anyway, I love your book.
Any comments or burning questions that you'd like to share? Here, no, let's be, no, this goes really full.
Okay. Good. Hi there. First, I guess I wanted to say that I'm really excited to be here. I'm a super young activist and what we call menarchist, menstrual anarchist, and I do menstrual activism. And of course, Our Bodies Ourselves was one of the first times in which people talked about within a book alternative menstrual products. And I want to ask you all if you remember the moment in which you realized that alternative menstrual products were important and added it into the book, because I know that the first edition had mentioned it, but it wasn't as big of a deal at that point because it wasn't until '83 that 53 women died of TSS in the same year. So I'm wondering if any of you remember having this realization and adding it into your narrative or talking about it at all.
I can say two things. The main answer is that Esther Rome, our deceased beloved member, was the one who did a whole lot of work around TSS and around alternative, both menstrual massage and menstrual products. So that's the best I could do on that. But you're reminding me of a very early film by Emily Culpepper called, what was it called here? But it was a. It was about getting your period, and it showed a tampon, and it was just so shocking at the time, but it was really great. So, yes, thank you for your work.
Oh, thank you.
And for a new word, what is it called? Menarchist?
I don't actually have a question, but so I've written a history of the menstrual cup, and I was curious about this. They talked about Tassaway very briefly in the 73 edition, but that was only in production from 71 to 73, so it was kind of a missed opportunity, I think. They just failed as a business. So, fun fact, menstrual history.
And you're also writing a book about Barbara Seaman, right?
Yes.
I just wanted to add to the important work that Esther did. Both Esther and I were actually at meetings in Washington, D.C., meeting with the tampon manufacturers because after the whole TSS issue, there was a concern about the super absorbent compounds, things like carboxylmethylcellulose, and it was the work of women's health activists that got that out of all of the tampon products, and we believe that it was those super absorbent compounds that actually drew so much fluid out that sometimes there were lesions left in the vagina into which the TSS organism could get into the bloodstream. And so tampon products became safer. And Esther was a key person in going to those meetings and working to improve the safety of tampon products. So there's a federal connection there as well.
Okay, I'll move over. There we go. Hi, my name is Sansara Taylor, and first I want to say I found Our Bodies Ourselves hidden away in a box in the basement of my house growing up as a teenager, and I felt so like I was taking the book I wasn't supposed to see, and I read the entire thing. It had a huge impact on me, so I wanted to just share that, and it was secret. But I wanted to say also that I agree that the question of abortion is not the only question of women's reproductive health and women's reproductive rights. It's very central. But it is one of those things that is right now under such fire. Oh, yeah. So all out, and it is such a concentration of slamming women backwards, because if you can't control your reproduction, you really can't control anything about your lives. And so I do want to say, in the spirit of what you guys did then and what you're talking about now, there is a need for people to confront the political battle and assault. I mean, they're anti-science Congress people, who I would also say, a lot of them are Christian fascists. And they know what they're doing. They know it's not scientific. They actually are setting out to put women back into the back alleys, under male servitude, openly, as breeders of children. And so I do want to call on people. April 11th and 12th, we are doing emergency actions. I'd like to talk to all of you about this. Around abortion rights across the country, abortion on demand and without apology, and relying on ourselves, and not just hoping that a politician or a court order is going to reverse this trajectory, where yesterday's outrage becomes today's compromised position, and tomorrow's limit of what can be imagined. We've watched this whole trajectory roll further and further to the right, and we have to change it by getting out there in public. We're doing speak-outs on the 11th. It's a Friday. Women are going to tell their abortion stories pre-Roe, the stories that younger generations have not heard. We're going to bring alive the emergency, the clinic that was just destroyed in Montana this month. People don't know this. The clinics that were closed down in Texas, the women in the Rio Grande. There's one clinic left in Mississippi, April 28th. It could be closed. The same federal courts that closed Texas are going to rule on that one. And all of this, bring that alive. And then on the 12th, we're going into the streets. And everywhere, people should organize this with us. It's going to be a nationwide action, into the streets with bloody coat hangers that actually bring alive. When abortion is criminalized, women die. And shackles representing female enslavement that we're going to break and stand up to fight for this. So I want to invite people. Talk to me here. I'll have a flyer, and also at lunch, we're bringing people together to workshop and plan down in the cafeteria. Join us. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joan Chrysler from Connecticut College, and the menarchist is smiling at me. I'm a past president of the Society for Menstrual Cycle Research, and all the mentions of Esther Rome have inspired me to just stand up and say she was a member of our board of directors for many years, and we have a prize named after her that we give every 2 years for student research. If you're interested in the menstrual cycle, visit our website, www.menstruationresearch.org. Read our fabulous blog called Recycling. And we're starting a new academic journal called Women's Reproductive Health. The first issue will be out in May. So we're active, and we appreciate our long association with OBOS.
First, I want to say all of the books I'm pretty much have read through, and it's just wonderful, so thank you. I was just curious, with the sending the book in 2011 to all the congressmen and women, did you get responses? I'm just curious if
Judy can
what
totally
it
Judy
answer
can-
that.
brought.
'Cause she went down there a
Judy
bunch.
went down, yes.
Yes, we did get responses. There were about 35 visits in person. I did this with Christy Turlington Burns, who many of you remember is a cover model for Vogue and other places. She's since gone back to get her master's in public health, and she started a group called Every Mother Counts to reduce maternal mortality worldwide. And we were joined by 2 interns from the National Women's Health Network and her executive director, Erin Thornton. And it was a very interesting set of meetings. We even met with one Tea Party Republican who didn't know who we were, I think. I think he just wanted to meet Christy Turlington Burns. But we found a lot of receptivity, but more importantly, afterwards, we sent a copy to everyone we didn't hand deliver to. And we got some nice thank you letters. And I don't know how well they're being used. I know a few staffers have responded. Many women responded. But it was really to demonstrate that there's a combination of a lack of knowledge and what you just pointed out, which is actual willful rejection of the science that they know well exists. So we were stopping short of that. And this was nonpartisan, so everybody got it. And it was followed up another campaign, which was called Our Bodies, Our Votes, which was our effort to help engage young unmarried women. In fact, there are extra bumper stickers up there. They're called, show them up,
Yes.
point them out. If you want to get one, by all means do. That was to engage young unmarried women who were the cohort projected least likely to vote in the last presidential election. And because of many organizations, not just ours, that did not happen. And young unmarried women did vote, and they voted in their self-interest. So that was followed by Educate Congress, because some of the journalists said, it isn't just women, it's, members of Congress who need this. And it's something that needs to continue at the state level, because some of the most horrendous attacks, as you just heard, are at the state level, and we need to be responding there as well. The Abortion Care Network has got a great website. They just had their conference earlier this month in Florida, and they are the non-Planned Parenthood abortion clinics in this country under enormous siege, as you can imagine.
Let me just say that one recent victory in Massachusetts just last week is that women who are incarcerated will no longer wear shackles during childbirth. Finally. Wow.
Hi. For all the, this is a great panel, and for all the changes individual changes that's made, that OBOS has made in our lives, our bodies, ourselves. I think one of the greatest things about OBOS is that it's sparked and it's been a core of a widespread movement in hospitals, among doctors, among grassroots groups, to change the structures that impact women's health. And that's partly from your analysis, it's partly from your work. I'm curious whether the international editions keep that focus on the analysis and on building a movement of activists to change structures, not just to empower women with choice.
Yeah, well, they do. I mean, and also there's a wonderful book by Kathy Davis. She actually, part of the problem with the international editions is that we don't really read those languages, so we don't know the nuanced kind of interpretation of it. But someone did, and she wrote a book called, what is it? It's on your, on the timeline, which you can check if you're really, and she really does give a very careful analysis. It's called The Making of Our Bodies Ourselves, How Feminism Travels Across Borders. And I mean, each country, the thing that's fascinating about it, each country interprets these things in their own way, but there's always the personal and the institutional and the political analysis, and that's through every book.
And the other thing is, one of the things we can count on is it's a resource for women to talk to women. And we're smart. We figure things out and figure out things that are appropriate in our cultures. I mean, for instance, in 1995, I was at the Fourth World Conference and meeting with a woman who had translated the book into Chinese. And they couldn't distribute the book with the chapters on sexuality and lesbianism. But the pamphlets, so we said, they wanted our approval to get the word out. We said, well, get as much out as you can at the time. And they had the ability to get everything out within 3 weeks because of the structure of how the neighborhoods are set up and the distribution. So it's like the information gets out and women start asking more questions. And I trust women in other cultures as well.
Yeah, when we first started responding to requests for translations, that we would insist that they include every chapter. But as time went on, and particularly as it went into some third world countries where the culture was much different from ours, we took the same approach we took with ourselves, that women are the best experts on themselves, and they know what's going to fly in their culture and what isn't. And I know there's one project, I think it was the one in Tanzania, where the total focus is on nutrition.
No, that was the group of Tibetan nuns.
No.
Oh, no?
No, it was anyway. But it doesn't matter which was. But the point is that women know what people in their culture will respond to, and they start with that and gradually add more subjects. Some things can be discussed in the group, but not necessarily put on paper. So it depends a lot on the conditions that they're living in, what they include.
And we trust that the same process that Wendy talked about in terms of how we incorporated more awareness into our later editions, women around the world will do that too.
I had another observation too. For me, I was also in Berkeley, during the free speech movement and arrested, and it was my coming of age and empowering time. And the empowerment for women that I've seen over time is so important. But I remember in '76, I had just moved to Boston and had a woman gynecologist, and I think things have changed, but I just want to comment because I think it's so easy to think that all women are going to share these views. And I had a woman gynecologist who I was then, I can't remember my exact age, but I think I was like 28. And I didn't have children then, and she said, well, of course you're going to have your tubes tied. And I looked at her, and I said, are you crazy? I'm just 28 now. I think I want to have kids, And I remember thinking then, gosh, if I hadn't really been aware of being able to question even women, medical people, who knows what I would have done. And a lot of women just would take for granted what, the medical people. I mean, my husband happens to be a doctor, so, but so not all women subscribe to it. So I think it's a faulty assumption I think it's changing. This was back in '76, but I just wanted to comment on it. And that book, saved me. So.
It's about 5 of 11, so I think we probably need to end.
Any last word? Judy, wait a second, so people can hear you.
It's not that well known among younger women, and I know this from being on a lot of college campuses every year. If you're in women's studies or you get it from a family member or in your high school, otherwise you probably don't know about our bodies ourselves. There is an effort now to get schools who have health centers to get the clinic copy discount. That's a 70% discount. And to match alums from the colleges and universities with the schools to make small donations so that the book can be brought into dorms, into classrooms, and even given out to incoming freshmen if there's enough of a donation. Some schools do this already, and it's an incredibly useful thing for incoming freshmen, fresh women, whatever, when they have not had access. What? Boys need to read it as well, and many do, but it's also a matter of resources. And if you get any number of books on a campus, people dog-ear the copies over time. So think about it if you're an alumna of a school, get in touch and point out that at a 70% discount, And you only have to order a minimum of 12, prove your 501c3 status. This is a great deal, and it really will educate women on the campus and men too.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all. Also, if you haven't gotten it, we have a timeline, and we have some bumper stickers and some newsletters, so pick them up. Okay. Okay.
Let's get somebody to take a picture of the four of us.
Oh, yeah, let's do that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, before we pick up the books.
Okay.